morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told, out of Voice of Radio. So today we need to take a look at the best decks for the European International Championships. It's happening this weekend. I'm on the casting team, and it's going to be awesome, but I figured, you know what? If you lovely ladies and gentlemen are going to be watching this, maybe I should give you a little bit of a primer for the best decks to look out for. Now, one important thing about EUIC, it does have a new set legal, that is Prismatic Evolutions. Yes, I know there was a regional in Merida where it was legal, but that was just the one. So, look, it is a new set, but it's not brand new. It's not the first tournament, but it's still pretty new. The thing is, when it comes to Prismatic Evolutions, maybe some of the evolutions are going to surprise us. But realistically, there's two cards we really need to know about from that set. Firstly, Regigigas is a great card for taking out Terra Pokemon in any deck that can accelerate a whole bunch of energy, which basically means in Baxcalibur decks. You might be seeing Regigigas pop up in Baxcalibur decks. Not saying you will, but I'm saying there is a potential there. They might get a bit of a bump. You also, more likely, are going to be seeing it pop up in Lugia decks. Baxcalibur could get a bump, probably won't. Lugia will get a bump. Lugia is a better deck because Lugia uses its V-Star power to get out Archeops. Archeops accelerates a whole bunch of special energy. You pop it all on Regigigas, you smash, job's a good un. The other one we're worried about here is Badoo. Badoo is going to change a lot, because Badoo's got an attack for no energy that does 10 damage and stops your opponent playing item cards from their hand next turn. It's redonkulous. It's changing the game. Like, literally, actual, not exaggerating, changing the game. It means decks that are really reliant on item cards are now significantly worse than they were before, because a single Badoo can come and just slow you right down. Stage 2 decks that are overly reliant on rare candy, for instance, they are going to hurt. A nice rule of thumb is basically, how desperate are you for items in the early game? The more desperate you are for items, the more you're going to hate Badoo. Okay. So with all of that borne in mind then, what decks should you be looking out for? And look, there's a whole bunch of different decks that are available. There's a whole bunch of different ways that you can measure it. I'm not trying to give you a top 10 list or anything like that. I'm just giving you an example of the decks you should be looking out for. And I'm going to start off with what is, as far as I'm concerned, one of the biggest winners from Prismatic Evolutions being legal, and that's Miraidon. It won the Merida Regional, piloted by Azul Garcia Griego, and one of the cool things about Miraidon is that it's not that reliant on items. Now, don't get me wrong, Electric Generator is a big deal. It is a big part of the deck. I'm not arguing it's not. But you get a single Miraidon out, and then that can go and get your other Lightning Pokemon with its Tandem Unit ability. You can accelerate energy manually if you need to. Takes a bit longer, but you'll get there. And don't get me wrong, it's far from perfect, but it can weather the lack of items better than a lot of decks. It's only really Electric Generator that you're properly worried about here. And even then, we've got things like Magneton, which can accelerate energy. So I think we're probably going to be okay. But here's the thing about the deck. You've got so many different options. Iron Hands EX to take extra prizes, that's good. Raikou combined with Area Zero Underdepth, so you can go really wide, and then Lightning Rondo does a huge amount of damage. Yeah, that'll absolutely still work. There is a lot that you can do with this deck. Raichu comes out and gives you borderline unlimited damage, which is a huge advantage because every deck needs to do basically unlimited damage at some point. And yeah, you're pretty good. As a side note, the deck will play Pikachu, but I wouldn't worry too much about Pikachu. Pikachu is basically there to activate Area Zero Underdepth, let you use that stadium, because you're not going to be playing the right energy to actually attack with Pikachu. That's just not going to happen. So yeah, use Miraidon, whether Badoo, and then whether it's Iron Hands taking extra prizes, Raikou going wide, Raichu doing giant attacks, or just Miraidon itself, you've got a lot of different tricks. And then you've even got stuff like Latias, which will now give you free retreat, which is a huge bonus because now we're not using item cards to try and get out the active, which is great because of the whole Badoo thing I just told you about. So that is one of the decks that is really getting better in the Prismatic Evolutions meta. It won Merida Regionals, but it also came third place, piloted by Leandro Fernandez. It is a great, great, great deck. What else are we looking at being a great, great, great deck? Dragapult. Dragapult is a phenomenal deck, and it didn't actually win in Merida. Aiden Koos was the highest placing with 5th, but there were 5 of them in the top 12, as an example. It's a redonkulous deck, and Dragapult is a deck that's just got a huge amount going for it. I mean, the lovely Joe Bernard, he of Omnipoke, has described it as having the best attack in the game. And it's just 2 energy, 200 to the active, and drop 6 damage counters onto the bench. But remember, nowadays we've got Sparkling Crystal, which can turn that into a single energy attack, which is absurd. Then, of course, you've got Drakloak and its ability Recon Directive. Lets you look at the top 2 cards of your deck. One goes into your hand, the other goes to the bottom of your deck. But one of the really cool things about Dragapult is you're playing a 4/4 free line at least. You're playing a full 4 Drakloak because you want Recon Directive. Ideally, what you really want is 1 or 2 Dragapult and a couple of Drakloak in play. That's what you're really looking for here. So you don't need Rare Candy. The deck will probably play a couple because having that option to go from Dreepy up to Dragapult on turn 2 is too good. But it's not reliant on it like other Stage 2 decks, which is why it's able to weather the storm of something like Badoo so well. And honestly, this deck compared to a lot is really rather straightforward. You've got Dragapult doing its thing, and then you combine it with Dusknoir, using Curse Blast to drop a whole bunch of damage counters. And when you're combining the damage counters you're dropping from your attack with Dusknoir, and then your Radiant Pokemon of choice is going to be Radiant Alakazam, which allows you to move damage counters around. Specifically, Alakazam lets you move up to 2 damage counters from one of your opponent's Pokemon to another. So it lets you just rearrange nicely and just wreck your opponent's board absolutely beautifully. It's a really fun deck. It is one which we are absolutely loving. So that's one which you should look out for. And honestly, as much as I love Miraidon, it is Dragapult that is the presumptive best deck going into EUIC. It was the most repped deck in, like top 12, for instance, in Merida, although it didn't even make top 4 in the end. If you look at people like Justin Basil, who are collecting results of online tournaments, etc., Dragapult is number 1. It is a big deck. The other big deck is Gardevoir. And here's the thing, right? Gardevoir, there's a lot here which looks very, very similar to Dragapult. It's a Stage 2 EX, which in theory is a bad thing, but it's got a Stage 1 with a great draw power, so you're going to be using the Stage 1 and not being reliant on Rare Candy. Refinement lets you discard a card from your hand to draw 2 cards. So, again, you can play Rare Candy. There's nothing to say you can't play Rare Candy in the deck, although, unlike Dragapult, the deck generally doesn't. Dragapult, you generally play a couple of Rare Candy to give you that option to go turn 2 Dragapult Smash. It's not the way Gardevoir plays, so although Gardevoir can play Rare Candy, generally it's not something you would usually expect to see, and where it's there, it's kind of a one-off at best. But Gardevoir's got an ability that accelerates as much psychic energy as you like. As often as you like during your turn, you can attach a basic Psychic from your discard pile to one of your Psychic Pokemon at the cost of putting 2 damage counters on them. Cool. The thing is, you've then got an awful lot of options here, like, for instance, Screamtail. Because Screamtail does damage to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon, dependent on the amount of damage that's on Screamtail. But the thing is, you're going to damage Screamtail with your ability, and then Roaring Scream's going to do 20 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon. It's actually any Pokemon, not just bench, for each damage counter on this Pokemon. Basically, count the damage on Screamtail, double it, do it to one of your opponent's Pokemon. Or we can be sitting there rocking with Cresselia, which moves 2 damage counters from each of your Pokemon over to one of your opponents. And this isn't bench damage in the traditional doing it way, it is moving damage counters. So again, you use Gardevoir to get all the damage down onto your Pokemon, and then you can use Cresselia to move it over and start KOing those bench Pokemon. It is an awkward deck to play with an awful lot of tricks, but it's one that the really high-level players can play very well. And let's not forget that Henry Chow over in North America this season has already won 2 regional championships playing Gardevoir. Realistically speaking, I think we can all assume Henry Chow will be playing Gardevoir at EUIC, and we can assume they're going to be doing very, very well. And honestly, the top 3 decks presumptively going in are Dragapult, Gardevoir, Miraidon. Nominally, I think you put Dragapult top, and then Gardevoir and Miraidon can fight first, second, and third. But they are the top 3 decks that I'm personally expecting going into the event. It's not to say they're the only ones that can win. It is to say that they're the ones I'm expecting. And you'll notice that all of those are decks that are particularly good at dealing with the Badoo problem. That is not a coincidence. So what other decks are we expecting to be around but not quite as good? Well, I mentioned Lugia earlier. That's still a top deck. Lugia using its V-Star power to get Archeops out. Archeops accelerating a whole bunch of energy. And then Lugia smashes. Didn't actually make top 16 in Merida, but came 17th. And again, we're talking a smaller regional there. I mean, still over 1,000 people. Still a big regional, don't get me wrong. But I'm just saying you can't, it's interesting to look at the results of the Merida Regional, but let's not pretend that that is absolutely perfect. We do need to be a little bit careful with that. Good information, not perfect. But there's a whole bunch of stuff this has got going for it. You've got Chinchino as a single prize attacker that can come in and do massive damage. You just pile energy on. You deal 70 damage for each energy on you. Oh, yeah. You can pile energy on and then do big damage for the energy that's piled on. That's a good thing. I've already mentioned Regigigas that for 4 energy can do 330 to a Terra Pokemon. Like, for instance, Dragapult. Yeah, that's going to be kind of fun. And then we've got other things. It's another deck that can actually use Iron Hands really effectively because of Legacy Energy. And the thing about Legacy Energy is that it actually means you give up 1 less prize when you are KO'd with it attached. So not only can Legacy Energy give you access to your Iron Hands to take cheeky extra prizes, amp you very much as you get to take an extra prize when you take a KO, but you also then give up 1 less prize when you are KO'd, and it's so much fun sometimes when you've got your Iron Hands in the active and you take a big prize and you say to your opponent, look, you can either take out this big Pokemon for only 1 prize, or leave it there and I'm going to take another 2 prizes next turn. Puts your opponent in a very awkward situation. We also actually see, I've seen this starting to creep back into Lugia decks now in this format, Drapions back! For the longest time, it was just a counter against Mew V Max decks, because it was basically a free attacker that one-hit KO them. But actually, Drapion V here, for 4 colorless energy, does 190. That's easily enough to KO a Gardevoir with weakness, and the energy's not a problem because you're playing around with Archeops. And with Gardevoir being the 2nd or 3rd best deck in the meta right now, Drapion's actually very well positioned. And in theory, Lugia's got Regigigas to take out Dragapult, and then Drapion to take out Gardevoir, and things like Chinchino to just take out 2 prizes with a 1 prizer. Keep an eye on this one. This one could be very, very good. The other deck which I think really needs to be looked at as a serious contender here is Archaladon. I'm not saying these 5 decks are the only 5 to use. I'm saying that these are the 5 I've mostly got my eye on. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. Archaladon is not my favourite deck. It is not a deck which I'm a huge fan of playing. It is not my play style. And it really did not have a good showing in Marina. It was there. I think it got like 39th, played by Luis Guillermo Terreros Rosales. Sorry for that pronunciation. It's there. I just don't think it's that good. And basically, Archaladon's got an ability which accelerates energy to one of your Pokemon, normally itself, and then Metal Defender comes out and does good damage while taking away your weakness, and you got big HP, and you're just sitting there rolling. You play it with Relicanth, so that you can copy the attacks of your previous evolutions, and then when you do that, you've got your Duraludon there, that's got an outrage attack doing extra damage depending on the damage on you. So you've got no weakness and you've got a huge HP. So the theory here is that your opponent doesn't one-hit KO you, and then you can use Relicanth to copy Duraludon's attack, and then, Raging Hammer does 80 plus 10 damage for each damage counter on you, and that builds up very, very, very quickly. So you do good damage, and then if you don't get one-hit KO'd, which you probably won't, you've got a really nice outrage attack to come on in there with. It's a fun deck, and it's clearly got a lot of potential, and it's clearly one which is doing all right. But I'm just telling you that it's not for me personally. It didn't have a great showing in Marina, but Justin Basil has got it as a top 5 deck. And I think there's enough there, and certainly if you looked at this metagame in Japan, Archaladon was a big player, and it was a deck absolutely to watch out for. I'm just putting my stable out here that I'm not sure this is as good as other people are saying, but I've had some in-depth conversations with very high-level players who are telling me that this is a deck which is absolutely legit in this meta, so I'm willing to believe it for now. I'm just saying, wait and see. Let's just wait and see for this one. Now, they are, as far as I'm concerned, they are the 5 real contenders in this format. They are not the only contenders. There was a Gouging Fire deck that got second in Marina, so maybe that's one we could see reappearing. That's one that I've definitely got my eye on as a fun deck moving forward. We've got control decks like Pidgeot and Snorlax, which are still there and still potentially viable. Charizard, I worry because of the over-reliance on rare candy, but Charizard is still a powerful deck that could surprise a lot of people. And let's not forget that Clorf got a top 4 finish in Marina, so maybe Clorf decks are coming back around. I don't know. For now, I've told you what I can tell you about the metagame. That's what we're expecting. So now it's over to you guys. Tell me which of these decks you're expecting to do well. Tell me what your pick is. Tell me anything you want to tell me in the comment section. Go nuts! Be nice. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWasi. That's where we talk about Pokemon and a whole bunch of other card games. And please do consider checking out patreon.com/PTCG Radio, where you can support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all kinds of fun things. And get shout-outs on the channel like the lovely Evan Parker, who's been a supporter of ours for a while now and is a very lovely person. So shout out to them for the support and the loveliness. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.